The inline spinner was invented in the 19th century. It caught fish back then, it catches them now, and it will catch them 100 years from now on one condition, if you understand how to work with it. If not, it's just a piece of metal on a hook that flies into the water and comes back empty. Most anglers keep a spinner in their tackle box as a backup option. They take it out when nothing is biting, make 10 casts, nothing happens, put it back, and never realize that the problem wasn't the lure. Today we'll break down 10 mistakes that turn one of the best lures into useless dead weight and explain why predators ignore it from a biological perspective. Before talking about the mistakes, we need to understand one thing. Why does a spinner catch fish at all? It doesn't just catch them, but sometimes catches them better than hard baits that cost several thousand rubles. If you understand this, many mistakes will become obvious on their own. Predatory fish, pike, perch, walleye, have a special organ that humans do not have. It's called the lateral line. It's a system of sensitive cells that runs along the entire body of the fish. It detects the slightest water fluctuations, pressure, vibration, and turbulence. The fish literally feels movement in the water from several meters away, even in complete darkness, even in muddy water. This is neither sight nor hearing. It's a separate sense that we don't have. A spinner creates exactly what the lateral line reacts to the most in the water. The spinning blade produces a pulsating vibration that is rhythmic and stable. The fish hears this from afar and starts moving toward the source. This is the first hook, even before it actually sees the lure. But that's only half the story. The second half is what exactly the spinner imitates. Not just a bait fish, but a weak, wounded bait fish that is barely moving. A slowly spinning blade is a lure that struggles to hold its own in the current. To a predator, this is a signal of easy prey. Leonid Sabaneyev, who observed pike behavior in natural conditions back in the century before last, wrote that a predator almost never chases after a healthy, fast-moving fish. It attacks the one that behaves unnaturally. It slowed down, fell behind the school, or moves strangely. This is exactly what a properly retrieved spinner portrays. Let me know in the comments what lure you caught your very first pike or perch on. I wonder how many of you used a spinner. For a long time, I didn't understand this logic myself. I always had spinners in my tackle box. They lay there for years, but I almost never tied them on because it seemed like I couldn't get a bite on them. Until one fishing trip when I got to talking with a guy who fished primarily with spinners. He watched how I was retrieving, chuckled, and said three things: slower, deeper, and don't jerk it. I tried it. On the very next cast, I caught a perch. Ever since then, the spinner became a full-fledged tool rather than ballast at the bottom of the box. Everything I'm going to talk about next is what that fisherman explained to me and what I later tested on the water myself. It's important to understand one thing that almost everyone who picks up a spinner for the first time misses. This lure does not forgive a mechanical approach. With a jig, you can cast, wait, lift, and drop. There's a certain rhythm that works almost automatically. A spinner requires feel. You have to understand what's happening to it underwater every second of the retrieve. Is the blade spinning or not? Is it running near the bottom, or has it risen too high? Did it hit grass or a rock? You don't learn all this with your eyes, you feel it through the rod. And when that feeling comes, the spinner stops being a mystery and becomes an understandable tool. There is another biological fact that explains why the spinner is so effective specifically for active predators. Pike, perch, walleye. They are all ambush or pursuit-style hunters. They don't chase prey for long. They calculate the trajectory, make a short, precise dash, and attack. For this, they need a predictable target. A spinner on a steady, slow retrieve is the perfect predictable target. It travels in a straight line, at one depth, at one speed. The predator comes from the side, calculates the interception point, and strikes. Everything is just like in nature, except it doesn't end the way the fish expected. Now compare this to an erratic retrieve. The lure jumps up and down, speeds up, slows down, and darts to the sides. The predator tries to calculate the attack point and can't. It's too unpredictable, so it backs off. That's why a steady retrieve isn't just aesthetics. It's a biological necessity. Mistake number 1, reeling in too fast. This is the most common mistake, and it ruins the fishing most often. For some reason, many people think a spinner should move fast. The blade is spinning, flashing, vibrating, the whole deal. But remember what we just talked about. A predator attacks a weak bait fish, and a weak bait fish doesn't swim away at the speed of a torpedo. When you burn a spinner too fast, the blade stops spinning around its axis and starts pulling the entire lure with it. It starts spinning as a whole. This immediately transfers to the line, and you get line twist in your braid. Plus, there's zero resemblance to a live fish. It's just a metal top that is racing through the water. The predator looks, doesn't understand what it is, and leaves. The correct speed is when the blade is just barely starting to work. You should feel a light pulsation through the rod, not a hum, not the vibration of the entire tackle, but specifically a light, rhythmic pulsation. That is exactly the speed at which a pike turns around and follows. Mistake number 2, jerks and an uneven retrieve. You make a cast, start reeling, and here's where it begins. One turn is faster, the next is slower. The lure hits a rock. You yank it with the rod, and that's it. The action is ruined. The blade stops for a second, then sharply starts spinning again. To a human, it's nonsense. To a predator, it's an alarm signal. A fish won't attack prey that behaves unpredictably. Remember the 3 attempts. A pike won't waste energy on a target whose trajectory is impossible to calculate. The retrieve should be like a metronome, steady, smooth, without drops. This requires a certain amount of concentration, especially in a current where the water speed changes, and you need to adjust your reeling speed. But this exact steadiness is the key. Mistake number 3, the wrong retrieve depth. Most anglers run their spinners roughly in the middle of the water column, well, somewhere around there anyway. Meanwhile, the predator is holding near the bottom, watching the lure pass overhead about 1.5 meters above it. The pike is an ambush predator. It's not going to rise up for a lure over a long distance. It waits for whatever passes through its strike zone. The maximum attack distance for a pike is a few of its body lengths, and that's during an active period. During a passive one, it won't move an inch unless the prey passes literally right in front of its nose. After casting, you need to let the lure sink. Count it down to the bottom, 1, 2, 3, and only then start your retrieve. Reel it so that the spinner runs right near the bottom, occasionally ticking off it. If the bottom is clean, that's great. If there's grass or snags, raise your rod slightly to avoid getting hung up. It's exactly the bottom zone that gives you access to the fish that are holding there, waiting. This is where that story I mentioned comes in. That fisherman on the bank who retaught me, the first thing he said was, "You're retrieving too high and too fast." At the time, I thought I was doing everything right. You look, the lure is flying, the blade is spinning. What else do you need? Turns out, you need a lot. He showed me his retrieve. I looked at the tip of his rod and saw a barely noticeable fine quiver. Not a wobble, but specifically a light, rhythmic vibration. This quiver is the sign that the blade is working correctly. Since then, I watched the rod tip, not the reel, and that changed everything. Mistake number 4, the wrong blade shape. Many anglers take one spinner and fish it everywhere, in the current, in a lake, and in a backwater, and then wonder why it works perfectly in one place and is dead silent in another. The thing is, the shape of the blade fundamentally changes the lure's behavior in the water. There are 2 main types. An elongated blade, also called a willow leaf. It stays tight to the lure's body, creates less resistance, and works well in a current. Even in a strong flow, this lure runs stable, without jerking. A round blade, like a Colorado or Aglia type, is wide and sits away from the lure's body at a wide angle. It creates powerful vibration and resistance. In a current, this will be a problem. The lure will get swept away and run sideways. But in still water or a weak current, the round blade provides that exact pulsation that a predator senses with its lateral line from afar. There are also intermediate shapes, oval blades, which are more versatile, but in extreme conditions, they fall short of specialized ones. The rule of thumb is simple. If you're going to a river with a normal current, take an elongated blade. If you're going to a lake or a quiet pond, take a round one. Your tackle box should have both options, and ideally in several sizes. Mistake number 5, the wrong lure size. This is a mistake from the I grabbed what I had series. A large lure creates strong vibration and is highly visible. But in cold water or when the fish are passive, it only spooks them. The predator is holding still, in no hurry, and suddenly something loud and big rushes past it. Instinct says, danger, get away. A small lure will work better in these conditions. Conversely, when the fish are active, feeding heavily, and busting bait, a tiny spinner will simply get lost among the real prey. Here you need a size that stands out. The general guideline is this. For perch in most conditions, a size 1 or 2 according to the MEPS classification is enough. These are lures weighing around 1/8 to 1/4 oz, 4/7 g. For pike, a size 3 or 4 starting from 3/8 oz, 10 g. For walleye, it depends on the conditions, but usually a size 4 or 5. Adjust the size to the season and the fish's activity, rather than just grabbing whatever you find first in your tackle box. Mistake number 6, a cheap lure that doesn't work on a slow retrieve. You already know that a slow retrieve is the key. Now imagine you're doing everything right. The speed is perfect, the depth is maintained, but the blade simply won't start spinning. It sticks. This is a problem with cheap lures from Chinese kits for 200 rubles apiece. They are poorly balanced, the wire shaft is bent, and the blade requires a decent amount of speed to start, meaning you are forced to reel fast just to get it to spin, which means you're breaking the main rule. Before every trip, test your lures right on the bank in calm water. Drop it in, pull it slowly. The blade should start working almost immediately with minimal tension. If it only starts spinning at high speed, it's better to leave that lure at home. Proven manufacturers like MEPS, Blue Fox, and Myron, or from domestic brands like Castmaster, maintain the standard. This isn't an ad, just reality. I want to specifically mention a treble hook with a dressed tail. It's not just a decoration. The dressing, a tuft of hair or synthetic fibers on the treble hook, serves 2 functions. First, it stabilizes the lure, acts like a small sail, and helps the blade start spinning at a slower speed. Second, it visually increases the size of the lure and makes it more attractive to predators. Strikes on a dressed treble hook are generally more confident. The fish engulfs the lure better. If you have a choice between identical lures, with a dressed hook and without, take the dressed one, especially for a slow retrieve. Mistake number 7, fishing where there are no fish. This sounds obvious, but in practice, most anglers do exactly this. They get to the river, stand on an open bank, cast into the middle, and methodically comb through empty water. Where is the pike at this time? Over there, by that bush, 1.5 meters from the bank, in a foot, 30 centimeters of water. Predators love ambushes. They need cover, a snag, a patch of grass, an overhanging bush, a current seam. From there they watch, and from there they attack. The shoreline zone isn't just shallow water you can ignore. It's the hunting grounds for pike and perch. Especially in the first half of summer, when bait fish hold near the bank in the warmed water, in the weeds. The predator goes where the forage base is. I've seen it many times. An angler pounds the middle of the river all day and leaves with nothing. And then toward evening, when he's already packing up his gear, he casts almost right at his feet and pulls out a pike. A coincidence? No, he just finally hit the right spot, cast parallel to the bank, as close as possible to the vegetation, if possible between bushes, into pockets, into the grass. Don't be afraid of shallow water. A pike in a foot of water is normal, especially in the morning and evening. Work all the promising spots, don't hang around too long in empty areas. Let me know in the comments which month spinners work best for you. It's interesting to compare across different regions. They are truly different stories. Mistake number 8, fishing with a spinner in the wrong season, or rather not understanding when it peaks. A spinner catches fish year-round, that's true, but there are periods when it is head and shoulders above any other lure. And there are periods when it's better to put it away. The best time for a spinner is early summer. The water has warmed up, the fish are active after spawning and are feeding heavily. This year's fry are still very small, 1/2 inch to 1 inch, barely visible. Last year's bait fish have grown and can easily escape predators. A spinner at this moment is the perfect imitation. It's not large, moves weakly, and creates vibration. It's in June that a spinner often beats a crankbait hands down. Fall is also a productive time, especially for perch. When perch start feeding heavily before winter and chase bait fish on the surface, a spinner in the upper water column makes the fishing trip. Winter. Here we put the spinner away. This is the territory of ice fishing gear. Early spring, while the water is cold, the fish are sluggish, and their reactions are slow. During this period, slower lures work better. A spinner is possible, but you need a very small size and an extremely slow retrieve. Sabaneyev noted that predator activity is directly related to water temperature and the behavior of forage fish. This observation, made over 100 years ago, is still relevant today. Before deciding which lure to tie on, think about where the bait fish are right now, how active the fish are, and what the water temperature is. The answers to these questions will determine whether you need a spinner right now. There is another point regarding the time of day that is often underestimated. A spinner works best during periods of predator activity, early morning and evening before sunset. In the hot midday, pike go deep into the shade and practically don't react to anything. If you arrive at the water at noon and are surprised by the silence, it's not the spinner's fault, it's just not its time. Shift your trips to dawn, and the result will be completely different. This is a rule that worked in Sabaneyev's time and works now. Mistake number 9, twisted braided line. This is a technical problem that ruins fishing quietly and unnoticeably. You cast, everything seems fine, but gradually the tackle starts behaving strangely. The braid flies off the spool in loops, sensitivity drops, and the lure runs somewhat wrong. The reason? The spinner twisted the line. What happens? The blade spins around the shaft, but with an improper retrieve or on a cheap lure, not only the blade starts spinning, but the entire lure as a whole. This rotation transfers to the line and gradually twists it. The thinner the braid, the faster it twists. To check it's simple. Take a section of braid near the reel and bring it in a loop to another loop. If the line immediately twists into a pigtail, it's already twisted. What to do? Find an elevated spot, strip off as much line as possible, drop the lure down, and let it hang. It will start untwisting on its own. This helps, but it's treating the symptom. Prevention: a swivel in your rig. Not a standard snap, but specifically a rolling swivel or a ball-bearing swivel. It absorbs the rotation before it reaches the line. You need to place it between the braid and the leader. This is a mandatory rigging element for a spinner. Without it, you are simply postponing the problem. Mistake number 10, fishing without a wire leader when fishing for pike. This is a classic. A guy ties on a spinner, makes 3 or 4 retrieves, gets a bite, and gets bitten off. The pike bit through the braid or monofilament with its teeth, and the lure is now in the fish's stomach. A wire leader 6 to 8 inches, 15-20 centimeters long, made of single-strand wire or soft wire cable solves this problem completely. Some think that a leader spooks the fish. It doesn't spook pike. A pike is an aggressive predator that attacks based on vibration and silhouette and doesn't inspect the rig. But the lack of a leader has cost many anglers more than one lure per season. The setup is simple: braid, rolling swivel, wire leader, 6 inches, lure. Here is a working spinner rig for pike that won't let you down. I'll separately mention the hook set on a spinner. This is also a mistake that is made constantly. I just didn't highlight it as a separate point. With a spinner, you don't need a sharp, lightning-fast hook set like with a jig. There, the fish often strikes the lead head, and if you don't set the hook immediately, it will drop it. A spinner is a different story. A perch might first hit the lure on the side, bounce off, then catch up and take it properly. A pike often attacks and immediately turns around, engulfing it. If you set the hook at the moment of the first strike, you'll simply yank the lure right out of its teeth. When you feel a bite, make a slight pause in your reeling, let the fish take it, and only then smoothly raise the rod. No whip, no jerk, just a smooth lift. Most lost fish on a spinner happen precisely because of a premature and overly sharp hook set. And the last thing about tackle: line length and line type. Some anglers fish spinners on monofilament line. This is possible, especially for beginners. Mono stretches and forgives mistakes during the fight, but braided line provides significantly better sensitivity. You feel every beat of the blade, every contact with the bottom, every bite, including cautious taps that on mono simply aren't felt. The optimal braid thickness for bank fishing with a spinner is from 10 to 15 lb test. This is a balance between casting distance, sensitivity, and strength in case of a pike or getting snagged on a log. Now let's talk about a few tactical things that don't fit into the format of mistakes, but directly affect the result. Let's call this advanced spinner work. Casting direction. Most anglers cast perpendicular to the bank or at an angle downstream. This is fine, but not always optimal. Casting upstream gives an interesting effect. The lure drops, the current turns it around. The blade starts working almost immediately with minimal reeling speed. At the same time, the retrieve ends up being very slow, almost in place. Exactly the kind that predators love. Pike and chub often hold facing upstream and watch what is floating toward them. A spinner moving downstream is a natural object to them, pausing during the retrieve. Many believe that a spinner must be retrieved strictly steadily. This rule is good but not absolute. In certain situations, a pause works. You reel, make a stop, the lure starts to sink, the blade slows down, then you resume, and the blade starts up again. At the moment you resume after a pause, strikes happen very often. This works especially well for pike during periods when they aren't very active. The fish follows, hesitating to attack a moving object. And then a pause. The prey has weakened, instinct kicks in. The pause shouldn't be long. 1 or 2 seconds is enough. That's plenty. Rod work. The entire retrieve doesn't have to be done just with the reel. Sometimes it's useful to retrieve with rod lifts. Lift, drop, lift. The lure changes depth. Its movement becomes less predictable. This can provoke an attack from a passive fish. Just don't confuse this with jerking. The movement should be smooth, the amplitude small. The tail spinner, a relative of the inline spinner, is worth knowing about. It's a lure with a heavy body and a small blade in the back. It works on a steady retrieve, a wavy retrieve, and even on a jigging retrieve. It performs especially well for perch in late fall when they become sluggish and don't react to a standard spinner. Weights from 1 or 4 to 1 and 2 Oz, 7 to 14 G, are the working range for most situations. If you fish with spinning gear and have never tried a tail spinner, I recommend getting familiar with it. It greatly expands your arsenal on tough days. Lure color. This is a topic for a separate conversation, but briefly. In muddy water, bright colors, gold, copper, orange. In clear water on a sunny day, silver. In overcast weather, warm tones again. It's not magic, it's the physics of light. In muddy water, warm colors reflect light better and are visible from further away. In clean, clear water, bright gold can blind the fish and spook them, while silver looks like a standard bait fish. Keep an eye on water clarity and change color accordingly. This is a simple rule that few people apply. Now let's talk about something that isn't in a single video about spinners that I've seen. Not about mistakes, but about when a spinner consciously beats other lures. Because every lure has its moment. A jig is one thing, a crankbait is another, a spinner is a third. The question is understanding what moment it is right now. A spinner wins when covering water, when fish are scattered across a large area, and you need to find them quickly. In an hour, you can comb a bank for half a kilometer, try 10 different spots. You can't work like that with a crankbait or a jig. Every cast requires more time and attention. A spinner allows you to move quickly, and the first bite will show you where the fish are holding. Then you can focus on that spot. A spinner wins in muddy water. When visibility is low after rains during a flood, in a river with a muddy bottom, a crankbait works worse because the fish simply can't see it. A spinner in muddy water is picked up by the lateral line's vibrations. The predator finds it not with its eyes but by feel. This is a huge advantage in conditions where other lures become blind. A spinner wins in a strong crosswind. A crankbait in such a wind turns into torture. It gets blown away. It's hard to control the retrieve. A spinner with an elongated blade cuts through the wind well, flies far, and maintains predictable behavior in the water. And about this, I have a real-life story. There was a fishing trip, I don't remember exactly. Late May, a river. The pike were supposed to be feeding heavily after spawning. I tied on an expensive crankbait that had performed well before. An hour, 0, change color, 0, depth, 0. The current that day was unusual, a bit muddy. The weather was changing. I was already getting ready to move to another spot and almost mechanically reached into my box for a spinner, just to try. Third cast, pike. Fifth cast, perch. Over the next hour, I caught 3 more. The crankbait just stayed in my pocket. That day, the spinner simply closed the deal. This doesn't mean a spinner is always better. It's better in specific conditions: muddy water, wind, covering water, early summer. In clear water with passive fish, a crankbait or a small, soft plastic often outfish it. A good angler isn't in love with just one lure. He understands what is happening on the water and chooses the tool for the situation. Have you noticed that there are days when a spinner crushes it while a crankbait is dead? Let me know in the comments. It's interesting to analyze such cases. Maybe we'll make a separate video about it. There is another point that is worth a separate conversation. That is finding fish on an unfamiliar body of water. You arrive at a new spot, you don't know where the hole is, where the riffle is, where the predators are holding. What do you tie on? If it's a crankbait, you'll start figuring out the depth, the bottom contour, and how it runs on that specific bottom. If it's a jig, you need to feel the bottom, understand the structure. A spinner in this situation works like a scout. You walk along the bank, make fan casts, and quickly comb the area. The first bite gives you a spot. From there, you can work it precisely. A spinner is a search tool, and in this role, it has no equal among other spinning lures. Another situation, fishing on riffles. A riffle is a favorite spot for chub, asp, and perch in the summertime. There isn't much water here. The current is fast. The bottom is rocky. A crankbait will constantly snag on rocks. A jig gets swept away by the current. But a spinner with an elongated blade runs perfectly in these conditions, against the current or at an angle to it right near the bottom. This is exactly how you catch chub on riffles. A slow retrieve across the flow, the lure just barely ticking the rocks. This is a working tactic that is hundreds of years old. It's just rarely talked about in the context of spinners. And the last thing in this section is about how to combine a spinner with other lures on a single fishing trip. You don't need to pick just one thing and stick with it to the end. A smart angler starts with a spinner, searches, probes, and finds the fish. Then when the spot is pinpointed, switches to a more targeted lure. Found perch on a drop-off? Tie on a small soft plastic on a drop shot rig. Found a pike near a snag? Try a diving crankbait. The spinner did its job as a scout. Now the specialist goes to work. This kind of tactic on unfamiliar water yields consistent results regardless of the season. If this breakdown changed the way you look at the classic spinner in your tackle box, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. We are uncovering the fishing secrets and history that often get overlooked. Let's build a better future for our fishing trips together. The next treasure trove of knowledge will be open soon. Tight lines. See you on the water.